Hey, Stewart's Chapel. This is Don Pierson, and Don Counts here. We're at Don's home. I appreciate his hospitality and Mary's Joe's. This is Friday's devotion. We're continuing our look at God's calling on our life. We're specifically dealing with God's calling on Christians. Today, we're in John chapter 21. Jesus has been crucified, and Jesus has risen from the dead. He has made himself known to some of his disciples. The disciples have gone back to fishing. Jesus has appeared to them. They've rushed to the bank to where Jesus has made a meal, some fish, and they have come to sit around the fire and to enjoy his fellowship and a few fish. Well, it's during this time that Jesus turns his attention specifically to Peter. And so in verse 15, Jesus said, "So when they had eaten breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, 'Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me more than these?' And he said to him, 'Yes, Lord, you know that I love you.' He said to him, 'Feed my lambs.' He said to him again, a second time, 'Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me?' He said to him, 'Yes, Lord, you know that I love you.' He said to him, 'Tend my sheep.' He said to him the third time, 'Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me?' Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, 'Do you love me?' And he said to him, 'Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you.' Jesus said to him, 'Feed my sheep.'" There's a lot of messages in that scripture, and you probably have heard many messages from that scripture. We could talk about the Greek word that God uses for love, or the issue of God reinstating or forgiving Peter. But in relationship to calling, I want to talk to you about the calling to tend to Jesus' sheep, to be a shepherd. This calling is specific to Peter. It's a very specific calling. Now, there is a sense that all of us share a general calling to make sure that we care for one another, that we help one another grow. But this is a very specific calling where Jesus addresses Peter. Now, some would argue that all of Jesus' disciples had the same calling, that was to tend to the sheep. And there is some truth in that. For our study, though, I want you to know that there are individuals that are given a very, very specific calling, and no one else can do that. We've looked at that in the sense in relationship to Jonah, Moses. We could go on and on others. Do you know what God has called you to do? Whatever that calling is, the fulfillment of that calling is what it looks like for you to follow Jesus. When you choose not to do that specific calling, regardless of all the other good things you may do, you are not following Jesus. Does that make sense? For example, years ago, I don't even remember the situation, but I began to use a illustration to help people to know that the burden is on God to reveal his calling or will for your life. So let me tell you the example that I have used in many, many cases. Let's say that I say to my son, "Jeremy, I have something very, very important for you to do. It is very important to me. It's very important. It will be very important to others. It will impact our family." And I walk away. my son is going to probably chase me and say, Dad, I want to know what that is. I want to know what is so important that it will impact you, it will impact me, and it will impact others and impact our family. And then I turn around and I say to my son, Jeremy, you're just going to have to figure that out. Well, that wouldn't be real kind or fair. I mean, if it's so important, why would I tell him you'll have to figure it out? So he runs off. He runs off and he cleans the garage. I mean, he puts everything in its place. The counter's clean, the floor's clean, trash is gone, every tool, everything in the garage is where it's supposed to be. He comes running to me. He says, Dad, I cleaned the garage. Is that what you wanted me to do that was so important? And I would look at him and say, no, that's not it, son. And I turn around and walk away. He chases me, Dad, if you've got something so important for me to do that it will change you, it will change me, it will change and affect others, please tell me what it is. No, son, you're just going to have to figure it out. So he runs off and he paints the whole house. I mean, the house is good. I mean, he doesn't get any on the grass. He doesn't get any on the windows, on the trim. The house is immaculate. He comes running, Dad, I want you to look. Everybody that drives by this house, they're going to see it and they're going to say, wow, what a house. And it's going to impact our family. It's going to impact our family by what they think about us. It's going to impact you by every time you come in, and everybody around is going to know. No, son, that's not it. Well, he runs off and he does a few other things and keeps coming back, and I keep telling him, no, that's not it. Do you know that's the way most of us think about God's will is? That it's some kind of secret thing that we have to go out and figure out what it is. I don't know. I've heard people say, well, you know, there's 90% of God's will right here in this book. I don't know how much it is, how much the percentage is. I have nothing to, I don't know what the full will of God is, so I can't really declare what the percentage of it is here. I do believe, though, a large part of the will of God is right here in the Word. But you see, what we're talking about is that specific calling where God says to you, now this is it. You see, the burden is always on God to reveal His specific will for you and I. At that point, once the revelation is done, we must choose to follow Him. If we do what He has revealed to us as His calling or will for our life, then we are following Him. On this particular morning, right after breakfast, on this particular day, God chose to speak directly and specifically to Peter. And He gave Peter a calling, not to feed Peter's flock or sheep, but to take care of Jesus' sheep. Something very similar happened to the Apostle John just a few days earlier. Right there at the foot of the cross, Jesus looked down and said to John, when He said to Mary, Mary, behold your son. John, behold your mother. It was a very specific calling that God gave to John in caring for his own mother. I don't know whether everybody has that kind of specific calling, okay? I can't speak to that. I don't know. But I do know this, that when God gives you a specific calling, you must choose whether you're going to follow Him or not. As pastors are given the calling to feed the flock, tend to the flock, care for the flock. That is a specific calling. In that sense, it's general. But I didn't want to spend today talking about the general. I want to spend some time just talking to you about your specific calling. Now, if you don't know what it is, then it's because God hasn't revealed it yet. One day He will. When He does, you will have to choose to follow Him. Love you, Sue Show.